Now on BBC News, a huge nationwide propaganda effort has been underway in China as the ruling Communist Party marks its centenary. In this special programme, John Sudworth and BBC correspondents across the region have been exploring the changes seen in China over the past 100 years.
China's ruling Communist Party has been celebrating the 100th anniversary of its founding with a massive nationwide propaganda campaign. It is, of course, a selective remembering, with the periodic bouts of chaos and violence that have marred one-party rule conveniently expunged from the record. I'm reporting from here in Taipei, having been forced to leave Beijing as a result of pressure from the Chinese authorities over my reporting, itself a sign of the increasing political pressure. I've been looking at the celebrations and their significance as China's giant capitalist economy celebrates its continued control by a rigid Leninist political system.
The unmistakable hallmarks of Communist Party rule were front and centre of its celebrations. The total control, the omnipotent leader, the unquestioning loyalty. Overlooking Tiananmen Square, the General Secretary spoke of how the party had saved China from a history of humiliation and of the power it now wields.
The Chinese people will never be bullied, oppressed or enslaved. Anyone who dares to try will have their heads cracked and bloodied against a great wall of steel forged by 1.4 billion Chinese people.
There are no references, of course, to the fact that on this spot in 1989, the party clung to power by shooting dead hundreds of unarmed protesters. Nor any mention of the violence and chaos of Chairman Mao's rule. And while the focus is on the economic success and China's big leap in living standards, critics fear that Xinjiang's internment camps and the crackdown on dissent in Hong Kong reveal once again the true nature of one-party rule. This former party insider was expelled last year for voicing concerns about the direction the party was taking. She's now in effective exile in the US.
In China, 100 years old also means a person has lived long, and it is time to think of death. The Communist Party should review its mistakes. It should be seeking redemption, not celebrating.
The theory used to be that as China got richer, it would get freer. But this celebration of rigid authoritarian control represents the total rejection of that notion, and with a triumphalism that's causing concern, including here in democratic Taiwan, with Xi Jinping making clear the party's mission to control a territory it still sees as its own.
Convinced that it's democracy, not authoritarianism, that's in decline, China intends to party on.
The Communist Party's longevity sometimes seems to have been built on a giant contradiction. Alongside the tightening political grip has come an explosion in personal choices and economic freedoms. The party has both unleashed the power of private enterprise and tamed it. Robin Brandt reports now from Shanghai on a relationship that one entrepreneur told the BBC was all about harmony.
China is ruled from Beijing, but it was here, gathering at this very spot in Shanghai, that the communists began their push for power. 100 years on, with around 90 million members, some are still as fervent in their following. This man checks a special app on the ideas of China's current leader every morning.
The first thing I do when I wake up is to answer the test questions. Of course, it's meaningful, so your mindset won't be loosened.
But China's communists have, well, how can you put it, evolved. Well, most have.
Xi Jinping has been China's chief communist for almost a decade, but the precise role of private enterprise and private money here is still uncertain. Take a look at Shanghai's skyline. It's littered with numerous examples of tall, strong private companies. But the government-controlled firms with their party links, they're usually nearby.
The government and the Communist Party control key areas of industry here. But private firms are the vast bulk of enterprise now. They create most new jobs. Here's how the relationship works, according to one businessman.
I feel the environment is very important because our party and the country give us the feeling that it is very safe. So we must be inseparable from the harmony of the society in the process of starting a business, right?
In short, the Communist Party wants business folk to get on with investing, innovating and expanding. In return, the companies, though, mustn't rock the boat. They mustn't challenge party control. We tried to get more people to sit down with me and talk to us about doing business in China. A factory owner, a very senior and well-connected academic, but none would talk on camera or on the record. The reason some are wary, well, they fear they may put a foot wrong and upset this man.
We encourage private enterprises to develop.
China's leader Xi Jinping knows that private business is key to economic growth and keeping his Communist Party in control. Hence this endorsement earlier this year.
The party and the state will offer support and provide guidance when private enterprises have difficulties. Therefore, private enterprises should strive to thrive bravely.
Thrive, yes, but with the party there to supervise. Almost half of private firms now have a party committee. As China's communists mark their centenary, the recent struggles of this man tells you a lot about doing business in China.
Robin, BBC News.
When I spoke to Jack Ma a few years back, he was approaching the height of his power. The co-founder and boss of Alibaba, the world's biggest retailer. China's most famous business person, a card-carrying party member. But late last year, a crackdown came from on high. Alipay, part of the bank-busting credit giant he founded, was about to go public. The government stopped it. Since then, Ma has barely been seen in public. His company had become too big, too powerful, a systemic threat, the government said. In today's China, Xi Jinping wants private business to thrive, but only if it will help the party thrive a little bit more.
Anniversaries abound this week for the Communist Party as Hong Kong marks 1 year since Beijing imposed its sweeping national security law on the city. Critics say it is all about increasing control and stifling dissent. Since its introduction, there have been more than 100 arrests, many of them Hong Kong's most prominent activists. Last week, charges under the national security law led to the closure of the city's most popular newspaper, Apple Daily. Danny Vincent has been speaking to Hong Kongers about the law 1 year on.
As a young man, Lu Mun Hong swam across this river from mainland China into Hong Kong, hoping to start a new life. It took him 9 hours to reach the shores of this former British colony. Nearly 50 years later, he says he was trying to escape poverty, not communism.
This is the critical time for the future of one country, two systems. It's important to safeguard it, and we should follow President Xi Jinping.
On the eve of the 100-year anniversary of the founding of the Chinese Communist Party, many questions over Hong Kong's future loom large. Critics say the introduction of the national security law a year ago is giving China complete control of this semi-autonomous city. Control over its territory has long been a goal of the Chinese Communist Party.
Every Chinese schoolchild is taught about the 100 years of humiliation, when China was weak and divided by foreign nations, when Hong Kong was still a British colony.
There's no doubt the law is changing Hong Kong. Alam was once part of the student protest movement.
Most of our generation is going through this. They are compelled to, or are planning to leave their homes. Many of my friends in Hong Kong are either arrested or have been persecuted with political cases. Many others have left Hong Kong due to the national security law and other reasons.
Despite more than 100 arrests since the law was introduced, some are determined to continue speaking out. Herbert Chow's shop sells protest memorabilia. It was raided by the National Security Police.
Instead of trying to use the national security law as a law to protect the national security of China and Hong Kong, and if they decided to use it as a weapon to silence people and they arrest you, what can I say? What can I do? I'm not going to change the way I live just because there is something so vague going around in society. If anything, I'm duty bound to prove that citizens of Hong Kong should not live in fear.
Hong Kong was promised certain political freedoms for 50 years after the handover. July 1st marks 24 years since this city was returned to China. But today, many fear those freedoms are already being eroded.
If the mission of the Chinese Communist Party has always been to transform the impoverished lives of the Chinese masses, well, that's a project that received many a setback under Chairman Mao and the long years of political mismanagement. In the 1980s, though, China entered a new era, and it was captured by a new generation of artists and photographers keen to bear witness to the huge social and economic changes now shaping the nation. My colleague Stephen McDonnell has spent time on the streets of Beijing with one of the country's most acclaimed street photographers, and he's been talking to him about the changes he's seen as China has transformed itself from a developing economy into a global economic powerhouse.
为什么喜欢摄影？源自于就是我是一个很好奇的人。我对未知的世界还没有发生的，那我就要去找到答案。Hi, Steven.
When Yan Zhigang was a student and his father gave him his first camera, he found his calling. Soon he was documenting a China under the upheaval of breakneck development.
如果我拍摄的是这种人的生活状态，我觉得这些东西它就会像一个酒一样，会慢慢释放出它的这个香味。因为我现在经常回到我过去拍照的一些，你都会惊叹周围的世界发生太激烈的变化。
哦，就是这个地方嘛。你觉得现在在中国老百姓的条件和以前比怎么样？
脸上的表情，我们要赶上这个时代快速变化的时代，需要做很多的努力，压力特别大。
你觉得现在好，还是那时候好，还是不一样？
像我父母这一代呢，他们会过得很舒服，他们拿到中国退休的工资，住着很好的房子，他们就很感谢这个国家给他带来的这些东西。
China's Communist Party has produced some disastrous social experiments. Mass starvation during the Great Leap Forward, economic collapse in the Cultural Revolution. However, Mao's death meant Deng Xiaoping coming to power and a period of opening up. The China Yan Zhigang started observing from the 1980s and 90s was now finally improving millions of people's lives.
这边应该是有几方面一样，但是几方面不一样。比如呢，应该那时候没有那种新的楼，对吗？
对，那时候的楼相对来说没有这种幕墙、玻璃幕墙
啊，是吗？
对，而且根本就没有那么多高楼。
Under capitalism with Chinese characteristics, there's an unspoken pact. People won't complain about the party as long as living standards keep improving. Even a massive widening wealth gap can be ignored.
对这个政党的这个拥护，你如果去真实的去倾听声音，是非常这个拥护的哈。中国人非常具有忍耐精神，他可以牺牲一些东西来换取安定稳定的一个生活。在这个时间的阶段，我觉得都是很满意的。但是对于比如说像我，希望能尝试更多的生活，更多的多元的这个东西呢，它可能在一定程度上会稍微有点限制我。 就是还不能做到完美。
Yan Zhigang says ordinary people engulfed in the times are like leaves in the wind. And he wonders just what will appear in front of his lens here in the years to come.
China has defied those who once said it was impossible to open up an economy without opening up its politics too. But for its critics and for those watching nervously from places like Taiwan, the prospect of a prosperous authoritarian, a communist party at 100 years old with now unlimited resources to enforce its intolerance of difference and dissent, is a cause for concern, not a moment for celebration.